the 7th of October, for the first time, the State of Israel tasted that very medicine it had been employing against Palestinians over the decade.
Hamas is hiding in shelters underground, in the tunnels they have built, and leaving the civilian population on the ground. What you did, Israel, doesn't bother us, it doesn't harm us. If you ask Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, the Jews are not a people, it's just a religion, there's no Jewish people.
That collateral damage is so massive that Israel's reputation becomes tarnished.
My heart aches for the suffering of the people of Gaza. What is proportional to the threat of annihilation? This war can end, Orkhan, today.
Many people would say that you're not taking enough measures to release your hostages.
We will do everything in our power to release our hostages. They have a policy of pay for slay. People talk about occupation and so on. There's no occupation in Gaza. We felt that the Azerbaijani people is standing with Israel in the time of need.
Hello everybody. With the war in Gaza continuing to inflame, the real question is if and when Israel will be able to destroy Hamas, and what the future holds in store for Palestinian civilians in Gaza. My guest today, His Excellency George Deek, Israeli Ambassador to Azerbaijan. Welcome to Caliber, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, allow me to offer my condolences on the tragic deaths of many Israelis, about 1,400 Israelis on the 7th of October in a terrorist attack perpetrated by Hamas. We feel your pain, and equally we mourn the tragic death of many civilian Palestinians over the past weeks. My first question to you is the following. Why Israel was so unprepared on the 7th of October?
That's a good question. A lot of people will have answers to provide, as Prime Minister said yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu, about what happened and how it happened and how it was possible that such a thing would happen inside Israel. Nobody in Israel saw this coming. Nobody expected something like this to be possible. But all these answers are going to be provided after the war ends. October 7th was the deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. It was the darkest day in Israeli history from its inception, 75 years. Never did we have so many civilians being butchered and killed in such a brutal and barbarian way as we have had this time. 1,400 Israelis killed. But I'll tell you something more, it's beyond that. Not only we didn't think that it is feasibly possible to come and do something like this inside Israel, but we didn't think they would actually carry out such a thing. After all, in the last years, we have done so many gestures towards Gaza to help them rebuild a life that we thought that all they're interested in is to really create a future for the people of Gaza. We have provided them fertilizers for agriculture. We have provided them with water. 10% of the water to Gaza comes from Israel. Even the water pipes that we have put there. We even provided them pickup trucks that they can use for agriculture and for other businesses. We have allowed fuel to go in freely into Gaza. We have allowed 18,500 people from Gaza to come to Israel. We thought all these measures mean that we are creating a possibility for a better future for the people of Gaza. And Hamas, as the government of Gaza, would encourage that trend so they can show they can govern as a somewhat normal government to the people of Gaza. But unfortunately, we were proven once again that when your enemies say that they want to kill you, when Hamas says in its charter, in its statements by its leaders, that we want to kill every Jew and every Israeli in the land, they actually mean it quite literally. And that's exactly what they did. The fertilizers that we provided for agriculture were used to create bombs. The water pipes we provided were used to manufacture the body of the rockets. The trucks, the pickup trucks that we gave them were the same pickup trucks with machine guns that invaded Israel on the 7th of October. The fuel that we have provided is fueling the rockets that they're launching. And there are even reports that some of the almost 20,000 people of Gaza who came to work in Israel provided intelligence and information about Israel to the leadership of Hamas. And that shows us the true nature of Hamas, a terrorist organization with ISIS-style execution that we are facing. And right now, all the questions of how it was possible and why it happened before our enemy, Hamas, means what they say. They want to kill us. And therefore, now we are engaged in a war to make sure that they have neither the capability nor the mere existence to execute those kind of atrocities. And I'm talking specifically about the organization, the terrorist organization of Hamas. And the aim of the goal is to make sure that no Israeli is going to have to fear that Hamas will invade his home ever again.
How close are you to destroying Hamas, and how imminent is the plan related to ground offensive?
You have to remember that we are now in a war, and this is a war that we did not choose, we did not start, and we would gladly avoid. Unfortunately, we were left with no choice. The horrors and the pictures that came out of Gaza, of children's rooms filled with blood because the children were killed in them, pictures of families slain in their houses. We have right now people who are kidnapped in Gaza, from babies to elderly and others. This is not something that we can ignore. Therefore, our military aims of this operation, this war that has been forced upon us, are the complete obliteration of Hamas, both its military capabilities and its governing capabilities, and the release of the 222, probably more, hostages that we have in Gaza, including one of them could be a citizen of Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much indeed. I've recently had a chance to speak to His Excellency Nasser Abdul Karim, Palestinian ambassador to Azerbaijan, and he told me something very interesting. He said that on the 7th of October, for the first time, State of Israel tasted that very medicine it had been employing against Palestinians over the decades. What do you have to say to this?
You know, I know the Palestinian ambassador. He's a colleague, and he's a nice guy, and I have nothing but respect to him. But his statement, this particular statement, is a complete disgrace to the business of diplomacy, the profession of diplomacy, which is aimed at peace building, not revenge and avenge. And saying that this is a taste of our own recipe is a complete disgrace. I want him to look in the eyes of Kfir, who is 9 months old. Right now he's being kidnapped in Gaza, held by terrorists, without his mother, without his father, who may both be killed, without anyone except terrorists with masks and guns. I want him to look him in the eyes and tell him, this is a taste of the recipe that you have cooked. I want him to look in the eyes of Aviv, a 2-year-old beautiful girl who just celebrated a birthday, who's also held hostage in Gaza, and tell her this is a taste of your own recipe. Ariel, who is 4 years old, held in Gaza with his mother and his twin brother. Is this a taste of their own recipe? Is it a taste of the recipe for Margalit, 78 years old, who have lived through the Holocaust time? Or maybe the whole family that has been slain to death, and many of them are now kidnapped in Gaza. If this is something that in diplomacy we are allowed to engage in, then I don't know this profession anymore. So I would strongly ask him to retract that statement. And I have to say, I watched his interview in full, the whole 57 minutes, and I failed to hear one word. I condemn the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th. The word condemn was not said. And frankly speaking, someone who cannot condemn the atrocities, the heinous atrocities of Hamas against our people, against the people of Israel, the raping of women so hard that their pelvises broke, the kidnapping of babies, entire families slain in their beds, elderly Holocaust survivors killed or kidnapped. If someone cannot condemn that, I think automatically he loses the moral ground.
I think it's a statement not just expressed by Palestinian ambassador to Azerbaijan, but many pro-Palestinian activists across the globe voice the same position. And the crux of the argument from their perspective is that, yeah, what happened is tragic. They do not justify it, but they always stop short of an outright condemnation. And their argument is that, first of all, Israel should apologize for its own wrongdoings over the past decades. Do you find this sort of approach disturbing?
Absolutely. It's very disturbing. And unfortunately, I agree with you that it's quite widespread among many circles in the Arab world and also beyond the Arab world. The differences between Israel, a liberal, vibrant democracy that seeks life, and Hamas, a terrorist organization designated as a terrorist organization by many countries in the world that seeks death, couldn't be starker. Read the Israeli Declaration of Independence. It's a declaration about creating life for the Jewish people. It's a declaration about ensuring equality and freedom for all people of all religions and races and the ethnic groups in Israel. Read the Hamas Charter. What does it say? We call for the killing of every Jew and every Israeli. We call for the complete annihilation of the state of Israel. The moral purpose of Hamas is death, while Israel's moral purpose is life. I'm an Arab. I come from a Christian Palestinian family, and I'm sitting here as the ambassador of the state of Israel. Can you imagine Hamas allowing a Jew to live under their rule, let alone become ambassador of that place? It can never happen. Israel goes to great length in its conduct of war to make sure no civilians are being targeted. Hamas goes to great length to make sure that civilian population, both Israeli and Palestinian, gets hurt. For example, now in Gaza, we have told people in the north part of the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is long. Gaza City is only a part of the Gaza Strip. We told people in the northern part of the Strip, wherever you are, it's going to be unsafe. Therefore, we sent brochures, we sent SMS, phone calls, we announced, please, here's a line on the map. Go south of this line where you will be protected and safe. And please evacuate the northern part of Gaza Strip. What did Hamas do? You can see in these pictures a long line of cars trying to go from the north to the south. Why is it jammed by traffic and suddenly stops here? Because Hamas blocked the road. And they tell people, don't go, don't leave, knowing that they are putting them in harm's way, knowing that they will be killed and they may be hurt if they stay there. Hamas wants the Palestinian population to suffer. How do I know this? Because Hamas is hiding in shelters underground, in the tunnels they have built, and leaving the civilian population on the ground where they can be hit. They are safe, and the civilians are completely exposed. How do I know this? Hamas purposely positions its command and control centers, purposely positions its arms caches, its weaponry, its activists embedded in civilian population precisely in order to either prevent Israel from striking, because they know that we would go to great length to make sure that civilians are not hurt, or if they are killed, they can weaponize the pictures as a propaganda tool against Israel. We are doing everything in our power to make sure we provide the Palestinian people with warnings and precaution measures, and to make sure that we strike only legitimate military targets of Hamas. We will not grant Hamas immunity because it hides in civilian population. And yet what is Hamas doing? We are creating shelters to protect our people and putting our soldiers on the front line, while they are putting their soldiers underground in shelters and putting their civilians in the front line. We are making sure, people are talking about the evacuation of Palestinians in Gaza. We have evacuated over 100,000 Israelis from the south of Israel and from the north of Israel. We have evacuated entire towns and moved them to the center. Why? Because we want to make them safe. And what does Hamas do? They keep the people where it's not safe or it's dangerous, purposely, despite early warnings, because they couldn't care less about the people of Gaza. And when I hear yesterday leaders of Hamas coming to the camera and saying, what you did, Israel, doesn't bother us, it doesn't harm us, it couldn't be less important, the resistance is well and will continue its fight. How dare you, on the backs of the people of Gaza, celebrate this as a victory? How dare you create this? And therefore, Hamas is an organization that simply has lost any legitimacy to exist. And we will do whatever it takes to make sure that after this war, whether it takes a week, a month, or a year, whatever it takes, that Hamas will be completely and utterly destroyed, so we can free the people of Israel from the threat of Hamas and the people of Gaza from the government of Hamas.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You seem to be absolutely determined to destroy Hamas. But Palestinian ambassador to Azerbaijan told me that they do not view Hamas as a terrorist organization. We know that worldwide, Hamas is accepted as a terrorist organization, Iranian proxy, but they do not view Hamas as a terrorist organization. They say it's part of our society, it's a militia. We disagree, we don't justify their actions. And in my communication with many Palestinians across the globe, very sensible people, they've told me that, yes, we don't like Hamas, but it's a reaction to something which is bad. And by bad, they mean the state of Israel. Do you believe this indirect legitimization of Hamas, from the perspective of many Palestinians, is actually part of the problem?
The legitimization of Hamas is probably the central part of the problem. Why? Because Hamas is not an organization that was created in order to seek a Palestinian state side by side with Israel. Hamas does not believe in the two-state solution. Hamas does not believe in coexistence between Jews and Arabs. Hamas believes very openly and very publicly. It's not me saying, it's they saying it. They believe that the state of Israel has no right to exist, the Jews have no right to live on the land, and therefore they are completely committed, as they say in their own charter and in the words of their leaders, to the complete and utter destruction of the state of Israel. Now, if you consider yourself a man of peace, if you consider yourself someone who wants to reach some political resolution with Israel, you legitimize an entity that is committed to a genocide, an entity, Hamas, that wants to eradicate Jewish existence from the land of Israel, from the land of Palestine as they perceive it. If you legitimize that, therefore you are justifying their goals, because they're not fighting for a political solution. They are fighting for a genocidal ideology. And by justifying a genocidal ideology, you're basically explaining to the world why peace never took place, why we have peace today in Israel. I mean, if you look at the efforts of Israel with the Arab world, we have peace with Egypt because Egypt wanted to have peace with Israel. We have peace with Jordan because Jordan wanted to have peace with Israel. We have peace with the UAE because the UAE wanted to have peace with Israel. We have peace with Morocco because Morocco wanted to have peace with Israel. We don't have peace with the Palestinian leadership because the Palestinian leadership did not want to have peace with Israel, because they refuse to recognize that the Jewish people are a people, they are the sense of peoplehood, and their homeland is the land of Israel, and they have an equal right, just like the Palestinians, for self-determination on their land. And I challenge the Palestinian ambassador and whoever you spoke to in the diaspora or elsewhere to say if they are truly people of peace, do you condemn a terrorist organization that commits atrocities that are equal to the ones of ISIS, if not worse, according to the Americans? And do you accept the fact that the Jews are a people, and as such, Israel is their homeland, and therefore they have an equal right to self-determination? They don't. And this is the reason why Palestinian leadership always refused to recognize two states for two peoples. They refused to say two peoples because if you ask Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, there are no two peoples. According to him, in his own words, the Jews are not a people. It's just a religion. There's no Jewish people. And when you start with those premises, it's very slippery slope to organizations like Hamas, because then you have this ideology that these people who are there are not a nation, they have no right to be here, and our goal is to eradicate them. And that's something nobody should accept. So if we want to create a better future for our children, a future of peace, a future of reconciliation, there's only one way. Give up the way of terrorism, destroy or surrender organizations like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and then recognize each other as two nations, as two peoples who want to live side by side with a right to establish a nation state, a Jewish nation state and a Palestinian nation state in the future. When that happens, peace will be possible.
You mentioned about the collateral damage to civilian Palestinians as a result of retaliatory measures taken by Israel. And you explained a lot about Hamas, how they behave, how they use human beings as shield to be able to protect themselves. But is there anything else Israel could do now to curb that collateral damage? Because Israel's right to self-defense is accepted by many across the globe. When they say, yes, Israel should be able to defend itself, but when they do so, that collateral damage is so massive that Israel's reputation becomes tarnished. How do you envision a plan which will reduce this element?
You know, I watched the images coming out of Gaza. I see them on my social media. I see them on Telegram. I see them everywhere. And I have to say, no decent human being can remain indifferent when seeing the suffering, not just in Israel, but also in Gaza. When you see people killed, babies harmed or even dead, no decent human being can remain indifferent, and my heart aches for the suffering of the people of Gaza. Unfortunately, while we are doing everything in our power to keep them safe, and I'll explain again what kind of measures we're taking, Hamas is doing everything to make sure they are unsafe. And these are the humanitarian catastrophic consequences of Hamas's behavior. If anyone has a better recipe or recommendation to Israel, how to conduct a war, which will allow us to achieve our military targets of destroying Hamas without or with less damage to the civilian population, please, I will provide you with my email address or my phone number. You can share it with your audience. We would be more than happy to receive any recommendations or creative ideas how to reduce civilian loss. But so far, the measures taken by Israel are unprecedented in the world in order to protect civilians. The precautions that we take, warning people, we send them SMS, we send them, we make phone calls. We have the knock on the roof, where we send a small bomb on the roof of the building to shake it so people would run away, and only then we target it. The measures that we take, in addition, of course, to the calls to evacuate complete neighborhoods of Gaza, telling people, this place is not safe for you. We don't want you to get hurt. Leave. Go to the designated areas. We're doing all this in order to avoid harming
inside
civilians.
Gaza, designated
Inside Gaza. I mean, if the Egyptians would like to open the border and allow Palestinians to go into Egypt to seek refuge, all the welcome, we would welcome such a move. But right now we're telling people inside Gaza there are areas where you can go and you will be safe. And the reason, and many Palestinians have left. We estimate around between 600,000 to 700,000 Palestinians have already left out of 1 million who live in the north, and around 300,000 to 400,000 haven't left yet. And we call on them, please evacuate, please leave. We don't want you to get hurt. Don't believe the Hamas propaganda who's urging you to stay because they want to see dead bodies because it's good for their propaganda.
How united is Israeli society at this juncture? You said you're very united in terms of destroying this Hamas threat. I mean, a couple of days ago, I listened to one Israeli left-wing intellectual, and he was effectively accusing of Israeli government not taking proportionate measures. So I realize that Israel is a very diverse society. There are different shades. But would you say, despite all of those, intellectuals, maybe some extreme religious people, despite all of those differing views, on the whole, Israel as a country is utterly united behind the government when it comes to the destruction of Hamas, or there are some differing views?
Before this war, we were a divided and polarized nation. We had very harsh arguments over the judicial reform that the government was promoting. We were divided on the lines of religious and secular, Arab and Jewish, left, right. Many division lines were between us. I can tell you that after October 7th, I think it's safe to say that there is an Israel before October 7th and there's another Israel after October 7th. Today we are more united than ever. Today we are more determined than ever. And today we share the same cause of destroying Hamas in a way that we have never been in the same mind before. We are completely united and determined, as I said, to make sure that our children in the south of Israel will never have to worry about the terrorists coming into their bedroom. That's not a situation any country would afford. And frankly, it makes a lot of sense that we are united. We've went through a tremendous tragedy. And the threat, which was very theoretical, became very real.
Would you say the concept of, how do they call it, proportionate reaction is totally out of the question here? It doesn't apply to this kind of situation.
Look, we are a law-abiding country with a professional army, and we follow the laws of armed conflict, including the rules of distinction and proportionality. But a lot of times, people confuse the term proportionality. They think that the proportionality is related to some kind of vengeance. If they kill 1,400, you should kill the same amount of people. And that is, first of all, that's not what the rule of proportionality says. The rule of proportionality is about the proportionality of the attack in comparison to the threat imposed by the other side. The greater the threat, the more disproportionate the attack can be to avoid that threat. And I ask you, what is proportional to the threat of annihilation? What is proportional to the threat of the destruction of your own country? That is something that we have to face every day. Proportionality does not mean proportional to what happened to you. Otherwise, some would argue that we would have to go to the exact same village, exact number of villages that they have invaded, kill the exact number of babies that they have killed, rape the exact number of women that they have raped, slain the exact number of families that they have slain. We are not animals. We are not barbarians. That is not what we do. We use the term of proportionality, and what we do in Gaza is not an operation to take vengeance. We don't want revenge. This war can end, Orkhan, today. Today, this war can end. All they have to do to end it, and no Palestinian and no Israeli would get hurt, are three things. Surrender by Hamas, disarm Gaza Strip, and release all the hostages. If they do all three, not a single Palestinian or Israeli will be hurt today. Unfortunately, they continue targeting us and they continue using their own population as a human shield, which means more civilians are going to get killed, more civilians are going to get hurt down the road. And when this war escalates on the ground, we might have even more. So let's end this today. Let's dismantle Hamas, PIJ, and the others. Disarm the Gaza Strip, make sure it doesn't pose any threat anymore to Israel, and then release our hostages so we can start a fresh page.
Many people would say that you're not taking enough measures to release your hostages across the globe. They say, because as you know, the Hamas claimed or suggested that if you reduce the extent of the bombardment, they could release some of them. And I'm sure it's utterly out of the question. What would you say to those people across the globe who would say you're not taking enough care of your hostages? I mean, hostages that are currently held in Gaza.
If a country in the world, if there's one country in the world that has proven over all its history that it sanctifies life of its people and does a lot to release them and to get them back hostages, it's Israel. In the Shalit deal several years ago, we released over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, among them Yahya Sinwar, who is now the leader of Hamas in Gaza. We released them of our own prison, a decision that is being questioned morally and politically today, whether it was wise or not. We will do everything in our power to release our hostages. But I would advise anyone who says that, don't fall into the propaganda and the lies of Hamas. Nobody knows what is really going on in the negotiations on the hostages behind the scenes. And we all know that negotiations are being attempted by the Americans, by the Qataris, and by others. Israel will not cease the fire because our primary goal is to destroy Hamas. And any ceasefire would allow them time to recuperate, which we cannot allow. But we will do whatever it takes to release our hostages. And don't fall in the propaganda of Hamas. We have seen Hamas engage in propaganda in incidents just in the last week, claiming Israel attacked schools or hospitals, etc. And it turned out to be completely
So is it absolutely certain that what happened on the 18th of October wasn't down to Israel, it was down to misfired Palestinian strike?
Well, I mean, what else we need to show to make people understand that if people at this stage do not believe that this was an attack by the PIJ, it's because they don't want to believe it, because it's comfortable for them to believe it was Israel. But right now, the proof from Israel, both the examination, the ballistic, the crater on the ground, everything shows that it was done by PIJ. An American investigation shows the same. A European investigation shows the same. In fact, a European fact-finding found out that the number of casualties even has been totally exaggerated, and it's between 10 to 50 people, not 500, as Hamas has claimed. And I think now it is proven beyond the shadow of the doubt that Israel did not attack the Baptist hospital, the Al-Ma'madani hospital in Gaza, that it was in fact a misfire by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad from within Gaza Strip. And I'll tell you more than that. Almost 20% of all the rockets they launched from Gaza, almost 20%, 1 out of every 5 rockets falls inside Gaza. Can you imagine?
It's a lack of competence?
Misfiring, lack of competence, amateureness. That means we had so far, from the 7th of October until today, over 500 rockets falling on the heads of the people of Gaza. We spoke today about Hamas not caring about its own civilians. It doesn't even take the necessary precautions to make sure that its rockets don't fall on its own civilians. It's that much disregard to their lives. And I'll tell you something more. There are 10 electricity lines connecting Israel to Gaza. We are also being blamed for not providing them electricity, for example. Out of the 10 electricity lines that connect Israel to Gaza, 9 of them were destroyed in the last 2 weeks. Do you know how they were destroyed? They were destroyed by rockets launched by Hamas. Hamas destroyed 9 of the 10 electricity lines connecting Israel to Gaza. And I can tell you and assure you, we're not going to send an Israeli electrician to fix it and get killed on the border. So it is beyond doubt that they attacked the hospital, purposely or not. And it's a pattern. The rockets are inaccurate, they are amateur and extremely dangerous because they fall on the heads of their own people.
Would you say that once Hamas is destroyed, that project, that idea, that position related to two-state solution will be more likely?
I certainly hope so. I think that the prospect of peace would be much brighter without terrorist organizations committed to our a complete destruction. And I certainly hope that the Palestinians will take that opportunity to make a change in the culture of hate that we have seen growing over there. Children being brought up not recognizing Israel, not in the 67 borders, but in any border whatsoever. Not recognizing the fact that Jews are a people and they have a right for self-determination on their own land. I certainly hope that this will change, because peace is something that is coming closer and closer as we have rapprochement with the Arab world. We have even had, and will continue to have, negotiations with Saudi Arabia about a normalization agreement. And I think the Palestinians should not miss the train. And maybe this, when Hamas will be out of the picture, maybe this will be an opening for a brighter future. But that requires not just the destruction of Hamas, it requires a changing of the entire culture and education system that rewards and glorifies terrorism, that glorifies killing Jews, not just by Hamas, also in the West Bank, controlled by the Palestinian Authority.
Once we forget about Hamas for the time being, when it comes to that ultimate eventuality, two-state solution, what are the other obstacles hindering this process, and how committed your government is to that eventuality?
Right now, we are focused on one primary goal, which means we have an immediate threat coming from Hamas, and we haven't even spoken about Hezbollah and Iran, which I think deserve a minute or two of discussion as well. But once we terminate terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, then we can discuss what the future holds. And I can already tell you that it would entail a change of paradigm in the Palestinian mentality about the state of Israel, because up until today, if you look at the geography and history books, not in Gaza, in the West Bank, Israel is not there. Israel does not appear. It's all Palestine. When you ask children who go to UNRWA schools, UN-funded and run schools, they teach them that nothing is more, brings them more glory than to kill Jews and to become a martyr. That this is the greatest aim of any child in Palestine. If you watch TV shows in the Palestinian territories, glorifying martyrs, and I will tell you more than this, the Palestinian Authority, led by Abu Mazen, which the ambassador in Baku represents, they have a policy of pay for slay, which means if you're a terrorist and you killed Israelis, you get rewarded by a monthly payment by the Palestinian Authority. And guess what? The more people you kill, the more money you get every month. It's an official declared policy by the Palestinian Authority. They do not deny it.
It's not Hamas, it's official
It's Palestinian
position.
Authority led by Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank. Every terrorist, no matter which faction, even if he is Hamas or Fatah or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Popular Front, whatever Palestinian terrorist commits an act that brings to the death and the destruction of Israelis and Jews, gets rewarded by a monthly stipend for the rest of his life, and even his family receives funding from the Palestinian Authority. And as I said, if you kill one Jew, you get a certain sum. If you kill 10 Jews, you get 10 times that sum. The more you kill, the more money you get. And I ask you, is that a recipe for peace? Is that how we create coexistence and tolerance in our region? Is that how we can promote children from Israel and children from Palestine, the future state of Palestine, to become friends and to live side by side? Or is this a recipe to create more terrorism? And that's what I'm afraid of.
See, so it looks like there's a long way to go. And it looks like the problem is not just about Hamas or Hamas-related entities, but also something fundamental about a Palestinian society in general. How open Israeli society to the idea that one day there will be a state of Palestine in the fullness of time?
I want to remind you that the Israeli society has supported the processes that led to agreements between us and the Palestinian side. And in fact, several Israeli prime ministers offered a deal to create a Palestinian state over almost the entirety of the 1967 lines. Barack did this in the year 2000. President Clinton had his own Clinton parameters on 2001. Prime Minister Olmert made a similar offer in 2006. And in all occasions, the answer by the Palestinian leadership, whether it was Arafat back then and today Mahmoud Abbas, was no. Although in 2006 there was no answer because he was afraid to say no, but he couldn't say yes. Why? You have to ask them. But if you ask me, I would say that they are still not ready, unfortunately, to recognize a Jewish state in any borders whatsoever. So it's like an industry of peace. They are living out of this attention they get from the world, from the donations, and from everything around it. But they're not willing to take the extra step. And Israel has proved that it is willing and able to go the extra step. Prime Minister Netanyahu also negotiated with the Palestinian leadership. And I want to remind you that in 2008, when Prime Minister Netanyahu came into office, and he was pressured by President Obama to freeze settlements in the West Bank, even in East Jerusalem. He did that to give a chance because he was told that if you do that, the Palestinians will come to the negotiations table and then we can advance peace. He did it. What happened? The Palestinians still refused to come to the negotiations table, still refused to engage in any way whatsoever. And our message to them is that Israel is committed to peace. And anyone who wants to have peace with Israel will have peace with Israel. Ask the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Emiratis, the Moroccans, the Bahrainis, and so many. If you want peace, now is the time. Stop hiding behind slogans. Stop hiding by launching international campaigns of terrorism or of isolation of Israel and what have you. Come, talk, recognize simple thing that the Jews are a nation that have a right of self-determination in the land of their forefathers, the land of Israel, and they have an equal right to have a state of their own on that land. If they do that, if you get the Palestinian ambassador, the Palestinian president to acknowledge this statement that I just told you, peace will be signed tomorrow morning.
Is there any chance that this conflict could escalate further and become something far more global? And where do you see Iran in this whole story?
Everybody knows that Hamas is not an isolated entity. It is funded, armed, and trained by Iran. There was a report yesterday in the Wall Street Journal that 500 people from Hamas were trained in Iran only a week ago before the October 7th. Hamas is just one of the proxies that Iran is running, funding and arming and training across the region. We know Hezbollah in the north of Israel, in Lebanon, the Assad regime, which is another proxy of Iran, the terrorist groups in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, who vowed to get involved against us as well, reportedly launched rockets against Israel. And we are dealing with an octopus of evil. That octopus is sending its different arms to different regions. And wherever they go, they saw destruction. They go to Iraq, they destroy the country. In Syria, they destroy the country. In Lebanon, Lebanon is in shambles. In the Palestinian territories, they came and supported a militant terrorist group and destroyed basically Gaza, which used to be a beautiful place. When Israel came out of Gaza in 2005, we disengaged in Gaza. People talk about occupation and so on. There's no occupation in Gaza. In 2005, Israel withdrew completely to the last inch from Gaza Strip. The idea was, let's give them a territory, a land, so they can show that they are capable of building a state. We will help them. We will help you, we told them. We will help you turn Gaza into the Singapore or the Hong Kong of the Middle East. And yet they turned it into a launching pad of Iranian warfare against Israel. And therefore, the decision whether this conflict is going to escalate or not is in their hands. Right now, we are fighting against Hamas. We have also some fighting with Hezbollah on our northern border, but it didn't grow big enough to become a full-blown war with Hezbollah. But it might. And it's their decision. If they stay out of it, we'll leave them out of it. But if they come in, the Americans have already said that they will also join, and they will use all their might together with our might, and we'll fight back, and we'll protect our people, our soldiers, our nation, and we'll do whatever it takes. And we warn all the proxies, but we warn Iran mainly. If you get involved, then you get involved.
Are you worried that now Turkish-Israeli normalisation seems to have been slightly slackened as a result of what happened after 7th of October?
We heard the statements by President Erdogan yesterday saying that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. We are deeply disappointed and we deplore these statements because Hamas is a terrorist organization recognized by many countries in the world, and what they did to our south is reminiscent of what ISIS did in other parts of the Middle East. And we hope that this tension between Israel and Turkey will eventually subside to reason, and we can go back to the track, to the positive track we were in before. But definitely we are disappointed by the statements that were made.
Israel has always been incredibly supportive of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. And in my view, the Second Karabakh War was a moment of truth. That was a moment when you realize that your friend in need is your friend indeed. And months ago, Azerbaijan restored its de facto sovereignty over the rest of Karabakh, dismantling the military capabilities of the separatist junta. How do you evaluate what happened on the 20th of September in the first place? How do you think it will affect the region's destiny and Israeli interest in the South Caucasus in particular?
I want to tell you something that truly touched me. 3 years ago, on October 2020, as the Second Karabakh War was still raging, Ganja city was bombed. Residential areas were bombed and civilians were killed and injured. Despite the heavy security risk, I took my car and I went to Ganja and I laid flowers on the ruins of the houses and the kindergartens that were destroyed by the rockets and offered my condolences to the families of the victims. And we even provided humanitarian aid to the Azerbaijanis that were affected by the attacks who lost everything. And exactly 3 years later, on October 2023, suddenly it is the Azerbaijani people in masses coming to our embassy to lay flowers at the gate here. And this symbolic gesture, exactly 3 years after my symbolic gesture in Ganja, truly touched us. We felt that the Azerbaijani people is standing with Israel in the time of need. We felt that the hearts of our peoples are united, that you feel our pain because we both share the same experience of civilians being targeted during warfare. That's something that truly touched me. We are following always the developments in the South Caucasus. We are always in touch with our dear friends in Azerbaijan, trying to understand and see what's going on. And we have always supported Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. We have never budged an inch from that position. And I was very proud that I was able to visit Shusha even before I visited other parts of Azerbaijan, something that seemed crazy when I started.
When was your first visit?
I visited, I think in February or March 2021. I was among the first to visit there when we had the diplomatic missions that were taken by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I remember it was just after the war, we could even see tanks and trucks on their side or flipped along the road. And back then, trust me, it wasn't the beautiful new road that the government has built to Shusha. It took us one day to get there and one day to get out of Shusha. Now it's super easy, and congratulations for the efforts that were taken. And I think now there's an opportunity for peace in the region. We hope that the negotiations between Azerbaijan, Armenia would bring about a lasting peace for the region that will allow connectivity between the countries and would allow them to really create a bridge between two countries and two regions that were set apart for a long time. So we are always following the developments. We're always talking to our friends here in Azerbaijan, seeing if there's any assistance needed, and we support the peace process that was led by various powers until lately. And we hope that these efforts will lead into the fruition very soon.
Ambassador, I'm bound to ask this question because when I was speaking to a Palestinian ambassador, we discussed the question of the perceived Palestinian sympathy for the Armenian separatism in Karabakh. He fundamentally denied all of these allegations and claims. But the part which is very interesting, and I'm going to ask about that particular element, he said that it's all down to Israel's intelligence forces. From the beginning of the early 90s, have been working very hard. Your government, your intelligence were working very hard to make sure Azerbaijanis are under the impression that Palestine supports Armenia and Armenian separatism in Karabakh. What is your view on this?
I would say this is very disrespectful to Azerbaijanis. To say that for 30 years, Azerbaijanis are not smart enough to see that they are being fooled by a foreign agency is simply disrespectful to the intelligence of the Azerbaijani leadership and the Azerbaijani people. And I'm quite puzzled by that statement. The Israeli-Azerbaijani relations are relations that are based both on interests, but also based on values and friendship that has been built over centuries between the Jewish people and the Azerbaijani people. And for any ambassador or any entity, it doesn't matter, to come here and to say, you Azerbaijanis were brainwashed to be friends with Israel, or Israel is brainwashing you that we are friends of Armenians, or first of all, there's nothing wrong of being friend of Azerbaijan and of Armenia. Israel has diplomatic relations with Armenia. We have deep respect for our Armenian friends as well. But we are strategic partners with Azerbaijan, and that is not coming on the expense of anyone else. And also we respect and we welcome the friendship between Azerbaijani people and Palestinian people. That's not something that we see as a threat to Israel. On the contrary, this is how you bring peace. And therefore, I would suggest to the ambassador and people to give the Azerbaijani people a little bit more credit, that they are not pawns that can be brainwashed for so long and so profoundly. You know, Abraham Lincoln once said, you can fool some of the people all the time, and you can fool all the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And I think this is very correct also in these circumstances.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm most grateful to you for your time. Again, my condolences on the tragic deaths of 1,400 Israelis. I very much hope that in our lifetime, we will see Israelis and Palestinians living together, peacefully coexisting, and hopefully what is described by many as internal conflict one day will no longer be there, and these subjects will not be discussed.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.